Well, I think, as the Admiral has said, and as your former ambassador to the United Nations has also said, it's a destabilizing action. It'll not only destabilize the Western Balkans, but it'll have a precedent-setting effect, not only in Europe but throughout the world. Here we have a small, tiny, failed state being created in the middle of the Balkans. And there's simply no justification for it. In the first place, it's illegal to do it. I mean, you can't acknowledge unilateral declarations of independence unless the UN gives its authority to do so. And there's no way the UN is going to do that. I mean, there are thousands of people around the world who would like to have their independence. And I can't think of any group that's less deserving than the Albanians in Kosovo. Not only have they murdered some 2,000 non-Albanians since they've taken over there, but they've burned 150 Christian churches. They have ethnically cleansed almost all of the non-Albanians out of Kosovo. Their record of violence and terror is almost unsurpassed. And here we have, the bastion of freedom and the rule of law and democracy, the United States, being the country that's encouraging these gangsters and terrorists to have their independence. I mean, some of the European countries are going along with it, but they're holding their noses in doing so. It sets a dreadful precedent. It's illegal. It's going to alienate even further Russia. It's destabilizing the Balkans, and it's demonstrating, I think, to the world, who used to look upon the United States as taking the moral high ground, as a cynical move to reward a group of gangsters. I mean, it's just an absolutely dreadful act, and I think from a strategic point of view, the idea that the United States would be supporting these guys instead of the biggest and the strongest and the most democratic state in the Balkans, Serbia, is just beyond belief.
I promised we'd go to the phones. Let's go to Nicholas in New York City first. You're on with my guests, James Bissett and Jim Jatras. Nicholas, thank you for the call.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim and Mr. Ambassador and Mr. Jatras for being here and for bringing this issue to the table. There is a perception that the State Department has an ideology of promoting Turkey in the Balkans and in the region. In the Greek American and Greek Cypriot community, this move to recognize Kosovo's so-called independence is terrifying and chilling because it sets a precedent for the recognition of the illegal occupation of Cyprus. Turkey's legacy in the Balkans is 600 years of holocausts and cultural genocide and anti-Christian terrorism. Is this an adequate response by Christians that?
No, it's not yet. Mr. Ambassador, if you don't mind, I'd like to say a few words first. It's not an adequate response. We do need Christians to contact the White House and this administration to say this is a mistake, partly because of the reasons that you just mentioned, Nicholas. Recently, a high Turkish official mentioned that Kosovo's unilateral declaration and independence would be a precedent for the northern part of Cyprus, which is occupied by the Turkish army. Rather than looking at what the Turkey might hope to lose in terms of its Kurdish region, Ankara is looking instead as to what it might gain in northern Cyprus and perhaps in northern Iraq. I'm sorry to say that there is a pro-Turkish and even to a great extent pro-Muslim bias in American policy in this part of the world, thinking we can appease the jihadists through this policy to the detriment of the Christians who live in this region.
Mr. Ambassador, you want to comment as well?
Oh, well, I agree entirely, and we mustn't overlook the strategic importance of Kosovo to the Islamic cause. We've heard people talk about the Green Triangle, that is, from Turkey stretching down through western and northern parts of the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. into Kosovo, if it becomes independent, into Albania, and into Bosnia, all Muslim countries that will create that so-called green triangle. It's really a frightening thing from a strategic point of view, and it does seem to me that the only basic reason, although it's a puzzle to me why the U.S. would be pushing this so hard, it seems that the only reason is, as Jim has said, to appease the Muslim world. And we know that what happens with appeasement, it just does not work. And not only that, it's going to alienate, as I say, one of the most powerful countries in the Balkans, that is Serbia. And it's going to alienate Russia and drive Serbia into the hands of the Russians. I mean, it's just a very, very bad move. And, it's true that the Muslims in Albania are not known for their fundamentalist beliefs in Islam, but at the same time, after the 150 churches, Christian churches, were burned and blasted down, over 300 new mosques have suddenly appeared in Kosovo, financed entirely by Wahhabi money from Saudi Arabia. Now that's the first signal that there's something going on here that we should all be very concerned about.
Nicholas, thanks for the call. Before we go to the next call, Jim, you had mentioned, as a matter of fact, in your own column, that the Serbian government itself is not apt to take this lying down by any means. As you say, they should their reaction to any illegal and forcible attempt to grab any of its territory should not be lightly dismissed.
No, it should not, because in addition to violating the UN Charter and the Helsinki Final Act, to impose this solution on Serbia would also violate the Serbian Constitution. Recently, their parliament passed a resolution requiring a response to states that illegally recognize Kosovo. I think as not only are we walking into a crisis with the Russians, we're walking into a crisis with the only essential country in the Western Balkans, which, as Ambassador Bissett points out, is the biggest democratic country in that part of the world, a country that's been our allies in 2 world wars, and we're talking about a permanent alienation of that country and throwing an unpredictable unleashing of the forces of destabilization in that region, the outcome of which we will find it very hard to predict.
Mickey in Troy, Michigan, quick question, then we'll take a break. Go ahead, Mickey. Thanks for calling.
Hi, everybody. Today I read that just on New Year's Eve, a few minutes after midnight, a bunch of Christian Serb homes were blown up in Kosovo. Then later on in the day, we hear that a Christian Serb bank got also blown up in Kosovo by Muslims. And I understand these kinds of things happen every day there, so here in the United States we care a great deal about human rights. The question is, how come Washington does not care about human rights of Christians in Kosovo?
All right, quickly, response from either or both you gentlemen, then we'll take a break.
Well, I might just say I think that the U.S. policy, indeed NATO and UN policy in Kosovo since the forces moved in 1999 has been really marked by cynicism, double standards, and cowardice. After all, over 30,000 NATO troops stood by and watched those Christian churches be burned. Nothing was done about it. U.S. and Canadian soldiers are being killed in Afghanistan every day. We just had several killed the other day. They're not getting the kind of help they should get from some of the fellow NATO countries. One of the reasons for that is that NATO has 17,000 plus troops in Kosovo. They're not there to protect the Serbs. They didn't do it. They're there in the knowledge that if Kosovo does become independent, there could be another outrage, and the Serbs that are in small ghettos throughout Kosovo in small numbers, and those that are in Mitrovica in the north in larger numbers, will suffer the same fate as their brothers and sisters have already done. They'll either be murdered or they'll be chased out of Kosovo. So the double standard is there, and it's, as I said earlier, a frightening prospect of what might happen, because the Serbs may not take this lying down. They don't usually do what everybody expects them to do.
Yeah, I'm going to take a quick question from Stella in Camp Hill, who's been patiently listening and waiting. Stella, how are you today?
I'm fine, Don. How are you? Hello, Jim. Hello, Ambassador. I would like to make this point. The Serbs have been accused of ethnically cleansing the Kosovo Albanians. If this is the case, can someone please tell me why Kosovo Albanians today make up more than percent of the population, while the Christian Serbs make up less than 10% when they were the majority in their Jerusalem. Furthermore, independence would mean a final eradication of Serbia's culture, language, religion, not to mention creating another jihadist country in the heart of Europe. This is pure insanity. Can you comment?
Well, at the beginning of the 20th century, the numbers of Albanians and Serbs in Kosovo were roughly equal. The balance shifted terribly under first the Nazi occupation, and later on under the communists, and now unfortunately under the NATO control. In fact, your listeners, Don, if they go to SaveKosovo.org, they can ask for a copy of our book, Hiding Genocide in Kosovo, that explains a bit of what has been happening during the last 8 years during the international control of the province. Excellent.
I wish we had more time. The ambassador had to drop off just a moment ago. We thank him as well for being with us. Stella, thank you for your call, and Jim, as always, thank you for being available to talk about this, and let's stay in touch on it because it's still imminent.
Thank you, Don, and like I say, this is likely to blow up in the next couple of months, and people will say, where in the world did this come from? And thank you for a public service to bring it to people's attention.
All right, we're going to continue to do that, folks. Again, SaveKosovo.org is the website you want to check out, SaveKosovo.org. And again, our thanks to Jim Jatras, and also to the ambassador from Canada, the former ambassador from Canada to this region, James Bissett.